Hi, Leah.
Hey Judy, how you doing?
Oh, I'm okay. It's
Yeah,
been a while.
I know it has been a while. Maybe we should start with that.
Yeah,
Why we've waited a bit to record. How does that feel?
that feels great.
Okay. So, welcome to another episode of the Anatomy of Ancestral Alchemy. And we will begin with why we've waited a bit. Would you like to share your perspective on that, or would you like me to start off with that?
Why don't you start?
Okay. So, my recollection of the past couple weeks has been that we've both been in our own grief storm in our unique ways.
Grief storm is spot on.
Yeah, it's really the phrase that comes to mind is grief storm. And for both of us, I know that's looked a little different just because obviously we're two different individuals. And it continues to be the theme of tapping into collective grief. And then the way that that is dropping us into our own ancestral grief. Yeah. What's been coming up for you around that lately? What type of grief has been dropping in for you specifically?
I feel like the world keeps spinning very rapidly. And
Mhm.
so I think back then it was the collective grief of being too scared to be fully embodied. So I'm just noticing like my throat clench up as I just named that. Things keep changing around us. And so just it activates my own ancestral trauma around violence and control and suppression.
Yeah. Yeah. Violence, control, and suppression. Yeah.
So it was a big one. And then because we can't stop the days from moving, the last weekend was Mother's Day. So I'm sitting in the grief of not necessarily a particular relationship with me and my mother, but the particular relationships, like when I tap into it with my cycle breakers group, it's around the parenting that none of us could get
Mm.
because of the collective trauma that continues to happen over and over again.
That's putting up barriers around parenting.
Yes. Parenting meaning the creation of safe space to be who you really are.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work that I used to do when I was a therapist was a lot of the childhood wounding, dealing with attachment trauma. But now, like with the zoomed out larger view, it's understanding, oh, those woundings happened within the context of collective trauma.
Yeah. How's your throat doing as you articulate that?
It's much easier to talk about that than the what I had talked about before.
Yeah. So it brought in some ease there for you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
How about for you?
Similarly, I think I've started doing some more specific ancestral healing work through a certain model and lineage. Some of you watching this may have heard of Daniel Four and his work, and been looking more at my dad's side, which is the side connected to Salem in our first episode. And I think what's come up for me more and more over the past couple weeks where we've had this break was the sense of how the moral injury on that side of my family specifically. And I've always known that about my dad's story. He was drafted into Vietnam, didn't believe in the war. And so there's no doubt there was a lot of moral injury there for him, but continuing to look back, I've really been sensing and feeling that more. And to me, it's amplifying the collective that we find ourselves in now of where some of us may be facing having to make those tough decisions.
Can you speak a little bit more about moral injury in case people don't know?
Yeah. So moral injury, if we take my dad's story as an example, is when somebody is put in a situation where they need to go against their morals or values in order to save their lives, other people's lives, or a nation's life, right? Or if we think about war between countries like US and Vietnam or some aspect of that. Yeah, that's the concept of moral injury. Yeah.
So being forced to do something that you would otherwise not ever do.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And some of that can be very instinctual. Like I know on a previous episode, I mentioned the bathroom incident that I had in Vegas, experienced in Vegas. And so that could have been more of like an instinctual in the moment Like there was no planning for that survival mode,
Right.
whereas my dad, even though it was its own version of survival mode, right, there was a little bit more time and a little bit more foresight in what he was stepping into. Doesn't
Right.
make it any better, it just makes it different, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, so that's how I understand a moral injury. Yeah. And I think it's also why suicide with veterans is really high. Yeah. I think it's like very related to moral injury.
What happens in you as you just name it?
For me, it's like I just feel really sad. Like my heart feels heavy,
Yeah.
and it feels really heavy as I start to think more about how we're seeing that show up more in our country now. And yeah, it's really sad. I think for me, there's definitely the heaviness in my heart. And then, oh yeah, I just noticed like I'm taking a lot of deep breaths, like needing to move that grief through my lungs. Yeah.
I'm wondering, when you talked about the moral injury and the active to fight in a war that you don't believe in, do you consider complicity as moral injury? Meaning, so let me just feel into this.
Yeah.
It's always this dance, not always. It's this current moment dance of like, how direct can I be? And so part of me wonders if moral injury can be if I see something that I don't agree with, but the risk of my body, if I were to intervene and say, this is not okay, but then I withhold that because of my safety,
Yeah.
does it land in my body as moral injury?
It's a great question. Yeah, to speak for myself, if I put myself in that position, I can see how it wouldn't be I don't think it would be as aggressive in my system, but it would certainly, I think, be a sense of moral injury for
Yes.
me. And
Yes.
it would be, I could see especially how multiple incidences of that would build up over time.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I do. Yeah. And that's right. Some of what we're noticing showing up for people is trying to navigate that for themselves. What does
Yeah.
that look like? And yeah, and sometimes we have to morally injure ourselves in order to stay protected too. Right? There's that aspect of it.
Right.
Like you were saying. Yeah. Yes, it's really tricky.
Reminds me of this particular story. So zooming out, is it okay if I just share? I offer stories at different times to another way in, because sometimes it can be like really hard to grasp what we're talking. So this is something that I read on Instagram, and it was this facility was like gathering soil from trees where there were lynchings.
Wow.
And they would gather the soil with the name of the person, put it in a jar, and then bring it to this place that was housing them as like memory and just honoring that this is a place where this person was. And so one of the folks who was doing this had stopped on the side of the road, went to a tree and was digging. And a car pulled over. And based on this was like an older white man had come out and was like, what are you doing? And of course, the person who was doing it was of color and got scared. And rather than saying, oh, it's just she decided to say the truth and said that they're gathering soil around the trees that held these dead bodies. And he asked permission to help. And while he was digging, and it was like this full body digging, he kept saying part of him just wonders if one of his ancestors committed a crime like this.
Yeah.
And so through this action of collecting this dirt was in some way alchemizing the potential harm, if not actively harming the body through active lynching.
Yeah.
Or actively supporting that by not saying anything. So I keep thinking about the moral injury of all of these people. Picnics would be around this type of action.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for the young children to go with their parents to witness the active unaliving of a human being, and then looking around and everyone's smiling and eating and everyone's okay with this, right?
Yep.
to learn to tolerate, oh, this is okay, even though there might be discomfort in the body if this doesn't seem so interesting. My voice is closing up. What I pick up in my nervous system is it's not safe to say this makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's so uncomfortable.
I just think of the generations of children that grew into adults whose nervous system needed to learn to tolerate something that was so inhumane.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then I land in the grief again.
You know. Yeah, it's very sad. And to think about too, especially with your specific example, that landing in white children, but then have kids.
Yes.
Desensitizing the nervous system to harm and inhumanity. Yeah.
That's actively done to particular groups of people.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I just dissociated.
Is that when you looked away?
I looked away and then I was like, oh, look at that plant there. And it was just like coming back into my body, because when you decolonize and you do this like healing work of clearing out your nervous system and healing your boundaries and however you want to call it, when you're doing this ancestral alchemy, I can track my body much quicker. So when we landed in the collective grief that every single one of us on this planet carries from our own ancestry within global history.
Yeah.
My body's like, how do we begin?
Yeah. I think the example you shared had a hint of that, at least, right? Which was this person connecting with their humanity and asking if they could help. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's also a really good example of we can point fingers at larger systems and sure they need to change. And also they really only change because we change.
Yes. Can you say more?
Because think about our kids or even ourselves that may go into politics one day, right? May end up holding a CEO position at a big company, may end up being in the healing arts, right? All of these positions that hold power in some way. Right. So it's like, yeah, I think that it can be really easy to avoid the internal work and the stepping up and asking one person if they need help or support with something, like the soil story.
Yes.
And instead sitting all day and pointing fingers. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that we can't vent and point fingers when that feels warranted and right, but is there a balance there at least? Are we still looking inside of ourselves?
Yes. And not only looking inside of ourselves, but empowering ourselves. I think there's a difference of pointing fingers and saying, you need to take care of that. Or, oh, I see this is a place. Let me roll up my sleeves and go and help.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And I love what you name about we can change the system. So a lot of the work that I do and you do is like changing mindset, like understanding like, oh, if I change my internal worldview, then everything changes as a ripple effect outside of me because I now see things in a different way.
That's right.
And the inevitability of that is systems will change, a change in awareness or consciousness or mindset.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I'll share too that when I think about the way moral injury has shown up in my white body ancestrally, it's been like the first several clients I had that were people of color. There was a lot of guilt moving through my system that I didn't know how to handle. That was the way that it was showing up for me.
Can you say more about the guilt?
It was showing up around, well, I'm trying to think about how it was specifically showing up. I think more so what was specifically showing up were things like feeling really paralyzed in session, constantly questioning if I had said the right thing or the best thing or something that would be supportive. I was just like hyper aware of not wanting to cause more harm.
Interesting.
But in a way that was actually not allowing me to connect well or to the best of my abilities. So I think that was the way it was showing up a lot in my, like, in specific work for me. And so the reason I connect that to moral injury is it feels like, yeah, really moral injury at the core of it is guilt and shame. Guilt that I caused this much harm, that I killed somebody, or
that I went against my boundary, that I
Right.
went against my integrity. Interesting.
so to me, it was like I could see that as a manifestation of the way that ancestral moral injury was showing up for me in those spaces. Yeah. And I hear that from a lot of white people I work with too, when they are in spaces like that and have asked me like how to handle certain things. A lot of it for them is guilt and shame also, based on the way their ancestors behaved or what they knew to be true. Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, it was like one, doing a lot of work around why, like literally why that was showing up for me, obviously. And then recognizing that the paralysis wasn't actually benefiting anybody, and recognizing that and then I think also understanding what a truly transformative reparative process could look like, so that I could take more risks in saying what I felt, and then knowing, okay, if I did cause some harm there, this would be the best way to try to repair this. Because I think that was also the piece I was really lacking understanding around, was like, because I think it is different. The power dynamics are different on multiple levels, right? Than me having a disagreement with a white friend of mine. There are multiple layers of power dynamics, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So interesting. I'm connecting. Oh, is it okay to interrupt? This fear of making a mistake.
Yeah.
It, like, I'm just tracking it in my nervous system. So it's like fear of making mistakes. If I make a mistake, then I'm bad. And if I'm bad, then I might be punished. So then connecting that punishment with unalived. So that charge
Yeah.
of if I make a mistake, someone might die, including me. So I'm just noticing that first. In case any of you listeners or viewers feel paralyzed, you were saying, by making a mistake, that's collective trauma. As human beings, as any creature on this land, mistakes are how we are supposed to grow and learn.
On a fundamental level, they're healthy and normal.
On a fundamental
Yeah.
level, when you're not now then determining the fate of a group of people, but just walking in the forest, I'm going to step on some moss and I'm going to hurt a little, I'm going to accidentally kill an ant, or the fact that living is supposed to change and destroy and create new things is a factor of life. But when our behaviors are connected to potential retaliation or the harming and aliving of somebody, including ourselves, then we get really confused on what it means to be human. So I think one of the main things that I'm grieving is how hard it is to remember to be human.
Yeah.
And how many generations in my ancestry has had to endure not being seen or allowed to be human.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you think about being human, what's your definition of that?
Such a good question. It's about, for me, as I'm like decolonizing and reclaiming my humanity, embodying my humanity, it's understanding what I actually want in my life, which has been really confusing because I've been told what it means to be human, or a mother or a wife or a daughter and those are actually not me at all.
Yeah.
They're just these shells of what it means to be human. So what I've been allowing myself, now that I've committed to my embodying my health and wholeness, is allowing myself to make lots of mistakes with people, because in the mistake making, I get to learn more about me and I get to learn more about you.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel like for me, being in a space that, and I think specifically speaks to your work, Judy, too, is like being in a space that was led by, at least in my case, I was a Black woman, around decolonizing work was really helpful, because I was able to actually feel what that energetic connection felt like
Yes.
in a space where we were actually doing that work.
Yeah.
And I know that's what you offer for people too. It was helpful to literally have that transference and sometimes counter transference too, and to be caught in around some of that. Yeah.
And see how when you were called in, did it seem like it was called in with love? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think this is the thing, when we know the intention is good and people are showing up to these spaces, right? And we know that the goal is to work on the impact. When that impact does happen, the love can still be present because that's literally where the work is. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's very specific to those spaces, those decolonial healing spaces. Yeah. Typically we'd say impact over intention all the time. But when people are heading into these spaces, we're actually really looking to we're looking to be as messy as possible.
And I think to understand, there's the lore. I just keep thinking when you're talking about that, like one of the images that comes to me is collective trauma that doesn't get processed, which is all of it has never had a chance or space to be processed. It's like you're just dumping shit on the floor in a room.
That's right.
Oh, no, there's no time to do that. Let's keep building. No, and what we're doing is we're building on top of bodies, and then the bodies decompose and the foundation, like we need to stop building and start sorting through to find the floor, to find the ground, like solid fucking ground.
Yeah. Yep.
And grief work has been the theme.
Yeah. I really have. What would you say daily have been your biggest go-tos with nervous system support over the past couple weeks? Like I know in here we've done some of the like bearing down and pulling, and has there been anything else that's been really supportive for you over the past couple of weeks?
Holding myself, like literally, I'll start to get dysregulated and I just hold myself and I to literally tell myself, I got you. Even just saying that brings, because so often, I think, especially as a child of immigrant parents, like no one had me. Not because they were negligent intentionally, but the impact was they were neglectful because they had to work and they had to neglect themselves in order to do that, to bring enough money for survival for the family. And so me literally holding myself and saying, I've got you, is reparative because now I don't feel like I have to do it alone.
Yeah.
And so to clarify, like the part of me that has me is the part that I call the functional adult, which is this higher self part of me, the whole and healed part that's grounded in the earth, resourced by the sun, connected to my source. And it just helps my wounded children just feel less activated.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing is, as I remind myself that I have me, the other thing that's been really helpful the last 2 weeks is I keep reaching out to friends. And it's friends who can actually see the truth. Like I know what's not resourceful is to be around people who are like talking about the weather and complaining about X, Y, and Z. Like I can only really hang out and tolerate the company of people who can see the truth.
Yeah.
It just makes me feel less crazy.
Totally. Very similar. It's always so hard because so for those of you that know astrology, my North Node is in Gemini, which is associated with small talk. And it should be heading that way. Should is a strong word here. But when I think about the parts of me that are like, I'm supposed to be small talking, I should be small talking. I'm like, I don't know how my Scorpio rising is ever going to step into that. And maybe this is a moment of that too. I've learned how to be like, this is how it actually shows up for me, which is like when you and I walk to block 11 and we're like, oh, it's such a pretty day out. I'm like, I can get behind that. I can get behind the flower that we come across that's pretty, or the cute dog, but that doesn't derail us from the deeper conversations.
Because the small talk is part of reality too.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. What else What has been resourceful for you the last couple of weeks?
I think moving my body a lot more in just the ways that I intuitively feel called to move. So like sitting here and like just early spring, or I've been repotting a lot of my plants because it's spring. And so just that movement feels really good. That's in connection with plant life and soil, and that's felt really nourishing and literally life-giving. It's really nice to see a lot of my plants starting to sprout their new spring leaves, and I'm like, there's some growth. Like literally, I looked over and one of our new figs was sprouting a new leaf, and I like took a deep breath. And I'm like, oh, that's the deep breathing is always my indication that something is settling. So that's been really nice. And then I think sleep, like really focusing on solid sleep. Doesn't mean it's always present, but am I laying down around the same time and trying to get up around the same time? Because at least for me, I think having that holding is helpful. So it's not so much about forcing myself to fall asleep or getting in that loop about I can't sleep. It's can I just lay down around the same time? I think that's been helpful. And hugs. Yeah. Yeah.
Something I've noticed for me in the last few weeks too is the care of my home. So when you're talking about the repotting of the plants, it's literally taking care of the land. And this realization for me has come in of, oh, my body is the land. It's the first time really that I've felt drawn to take care of my body, not out of guilt.
I love that. Not out of guilt.
Not out of guilt, but oh, this feels energizing to me. Like cooking, and I've been cooking so much the last couple of weeks, mainly because I've been creating so much space for my grief.
Judy's an awesome cook, by the way.
Thank you.
You really are.
Oh, that makes me feel so nice.
You are so good.
That's not what my kids say. So what's happened interestingly is because it's taken me as a mother, right? I've been trained to neglect my body because then I get the martyr award, which I hang over my kids sometimes when I'm not like resourced.
Yeah.
Do you know how much I do for you? This living through guilt. And so as I've created more space for myself to grieve, I've also created much more space for myself to live. And so I've been taking care of myself because it feels right and it feels good.
Yeah.
And through that, I've been taking care of my home space, my homeland, literally my home, like my condo that I live in.
Yeah.
And literally when I'm taking care of this space, like a lot of it is emptying out stuff that no longer serves me. I don't have to carry it just because in case. It feels so generative. Like again, it's not cleaning up the space out of guilt. Oh my gosh, people are going to judge me. It's cleaning out because it feels right, which is so different. I'm so used to living my life out of fear of judgment and guilt.
Yeah. I love that. Interesting how much a theme of guilt is present here today in our conversation. I don't think we've talked a lot about that.
Can you say more about how it's landing?
Yeah, to me, it feels like it's part of me wonders how much it's tied up in gender norms for us too. Like, I think those of us that have been socialized female tend to end up holding more guilt for our ancestral lineages.
So interesting, this phrase of women were taught to absorb the guilt of everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
And for some reason, it feels like guilt is one of the main obstacles to grieving. If I admit my guilt or my responsibility or someone else's responsibility, and I actually then can enter into the grief work.
Yes. Yep, I think there's a lot of truth to that too. Yeah.
So maybe an alchemical thing around if guilt paralyzes you to go just because you might be guilty of impact doesn't mean you're not worthy of love. Like the bottom line, the framework that we use is nothing changes your value.
Yeah.
As you are enough and you deserve love equal to everybody else. No more, no less.
Yeah. Yeah. And from a parts-based perspective, I just had this image of just offering compassion to that part of me that was holding guilt. Yeah. Yeah. Whenever you're doing internal work too, it's noticing like how much can that part receive data around where we are with our healing. Sometimes we can offer parts compassion and they're like, no fucking thank you. And there's a hard no, and that comes with its own work. And then slowly over time, you notice them taking in more and softening. And
Yeah, it's so interesting when I hear that no thank you. It reminds me of the moments when my youngest will push me away when I'm trying to give her love, and the rejection of it. No thank you, like actually triggers me. And the curious part, so my functional adult part is able to be like, huh, I wonder why they feel like they don't deserve love. And it's not, I don't need to change that, right? To get them to take in love. I just create space for, oh, that must be really hard.
yeah, you're creating space for curiosity.
Yes.
But like very open curiosity, not curiosity that needs an answer or like a change.
Or a fix. There's nothing wrong. There's a reason why there's a resistance to it.
Yeah.
Just like there's a reason why the guilt freezes us.
Yeah.
Because grief work is not easy.
That is not. Yeah. I remember when I was going through an experience of teachings. I don't even want to call it a program because that feels so like, meh. Reaction to that word. But essentially going through like a modern priestess training. And I remember at the end, I was like, I feel like I'm a grief priestess. And I remember being like, oh, it's not sexy at all. Like, people are out here like literally half naked and being like, this is no judgment. I actually really love this for the people that are like fully embodied in this. But I like getting in touch with your inner feminine, like most sexy parts in order to like come into empowerment. And that's their way of priestessing. And I'm like, I'm a grief priestess. And being like, this is really not sexy work. And it's not in the way that we traditionally think about sexy.
Oh, interesting.
But when I really think about it, I'm like, this is what connects us.
Say more.
Like, this is where aliveness and shared humanity and connection and between people.
Yes.
And internally comes in. And from there, just be really blunt here. I'm like, people can have great sex from that place.
Totally.
It's like, yeah. So it may not start off super sexy, but the connection is like ignition, right? Like I feel like it flames the fire of the more that we clear, the more that we can be really sensual beings in a very embodied way. Yeah. I don't know how all that just tied together, but somehow it did.
I have an image.
Yeah.
You're like, it's not sexy. And I'm like, it's not sexy based on. So I then got to the image of gardening. Right.
Yeah.
I remember when my kids were little and prior to me doing my decolonizing work.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to have a garden. That's so much work.
Yeah.
And then it would get really overgrown and all this other stuff. And what I didn't understand was that middle, the messy middle between like when you put it in and it's in these nice rows, and then you have to prune it and weed it and cut it back. And this is the messy middle, right?
Yeah.
And then after the messy middle, do you get the fruit? And so the grief work is actually not sexy.
Yeah.
And it's so rewarding because the grief work gets you to the fruit.
Yeah. Gets you to that great sex.
Yeah. It gets you to the great sex. It gets you to the authenticity. It gets you to the courage.
Yeah.
The courage of being who you really are. And that for me has been the last several years, is creating so much internal safety because the environment is so not safe, right? And so what do I have control over? This land, this body, creating that internal safety. And in doing that internal safety, I had to do the grief work. I had to grieve all of the different self-betrayals not only in my life, but in the lives of so many of my ancestors to survive. And in grieving all of those boundary crossings for myself and all the different ways that I didn't show up for myself in integrity, I had to grieve. And now that I've done a lot of grieving, doing a lot of great sex, great living, like all the sensual aliveness feels very worthwhile.
Yeah. I love that phrase, sensual aliveness. Yeah, like how are we feeling into this beautiful blooming flower, or great cup of coffee, all the little things. Yeah. And can we receive it? Yeah.
Without guilt.
Yeah, without the guilt. Exactly. Yeah. How's your body doing?
Feels really good to be back.
Yeah, same. I miss this space.
I miss this connecting with you.
Thank you. It is definitely helpful to connect in this energy with you together.
And to share it with you all. Just a good reminder. Please share our work. If any of these episodes resonate for you, share it with other people who are longing for a different way of being. There's so many more of us out there. And being able to connect in community is so generative and really important right now.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we will be back.